At your age, with no position of responsibility? Someone as incompetent as you is not needed in our company. I have prepared a termination letter, and we will pay severance. Pack your things and leave immediately. I silently endured the president's abusive tirade. Arguing with such a person is futile. Understood, I am terminated. I calmly stated, quickly packed my belongings, and left the office. To an outsider, I might appear as a defeated loser at the mercy of the president, but I had already grasped her vulnerability. I am Caroline, 48 years old. Most women my age are married, with grown children or even becoming grandmothers, but I am still single. I have had my share of romantic relationships, but simply, I never ended up married. Not that I completely lacked the desire, but with a fulfilling job and wonderful colleagues, I was content. However, a drastic change occurred a few months ago. My company is family-run, with executive roles filled exclusively by the chairman's relatives. The chairman's son, daughter, their spouses, all held sway. This didn't mean that we, the non-relatives, were treated poorly. Indeed, it was possible for us to climb the ranks. The chairman's charismatic leadership kept the company well-knit, and we had no major complaints. In fact, the bond among colleagues was strong, and we worked together daily with united effort. But when the chairman suddenly passed away and his son took over as chairman, the company faced an unexpected turn. The new president was Helena, the chairman's daughter. She was previously unknown to the company, and many of us were shocked that such an outsider was appointed. However, we learned she had been quite successful in her previous job at a top-tier company and joined ours at an opportune time, which made us somewhat understand the decision. At 38, Helena was also single, and my colleagues speculated about her character, perhaps a dedicated career woman or a tough, cold person. However, her appearance at the inauguration was the complete opposite of our expectations. She looked more like a club hostess with high exposure, teetering on thin high heels and dangling large earrings. The strong perfume was noticeable even from a distance, causing many to grimace. Her speech, impacted by her appearance, felt shallow and lacked a sense of commitment and passion for the company, leaving me with a sense of unease. But worrying wouldn't help. Focusing on the work at hand, I tried to shake off the inauguration's aftermath and settled into my tasks. However, not long after, Helena, our president, unexpectedly visited our department. Tension briefly spiked, but she ignored everyone and made a beeline for a colleague, Cecil, announcing, "I like you. You stood out at the ceremony earlier. Cecil, such a cute name. How about joining me for lunch to celebrate my appointment?" Cecil turned pale and was frozen. Not just him, everyone there lost their words and stood like statues. What was the president even saying? That was the atmosphere. Oh, don't look so surprised. Shocked to be invited by the president? I find that quite endearing. Helena continued before grabbing Cecil's arm, intending to leave. Cecil interjected. Please wait. I appreciate the offer, but I have urgent work to finish this morning. Could we possibly wait until break time? It was barely past 10 a.m. Too early to abandon work for a lunch outing. Is your work really that urgent? If so, someone else can handle it. Lunch with the president is far more valuable to you. I'll teach you what to prioritize. She insisted, pushing Cecil along despite his reluctance. By the time they returned, it was past 2 p.m. Cecil, 38, divorced a few years back and now single, was admired for his refined looks, growing more handsome with age. Many female colleagues harbored secret crushes on him, rejoicing at his divorce as it meant he was back on the market. While Helena's fondness for Cecil might be understandable, her behavior was unbecoming of a president. It was a revealing day, highlighting Helena's true character. To make up for the morning's disruption, Cecil ended up working late, a consequence of Helena's actions that benefited no one. Cecil, I've reserved a wonderful French restaurant for us today. The one with the chef I mentioned before. We better hurry or we'll be late. Helena would often appear, forcibly taking Cecil out for lengthy lunches. Cecil, you look so dignified while working. What are you working on now? As this became a regular occurrence, she began occupying the seat beside Cecil, disrupting his work with her chatter. Colleagues displaced by Helena struggled to complete their tasks, often resorting to overtime. Gradually, a simmering discontent towards Helena grew among the staff. While no one dared to voice their frustrations openly, it was clear that everyone shared the same sentiment. When exactly does Helena perform her presidential duties? It seems like she's not taking her job seriously at all. That's the look my colleagues and I shared as we watched her. I was busy helping Cecil and others with their work and overtime. While assisting Cecil one day, I tried to lighten the mood. Cecil, you've really been put through the ringer. It's tough being targeted by the wrong person. He responded apologetically. I'm so sorry for causing everyone trouble. I really appreciate your help, Caroline, especially since you have your work too. Cecil blamed himself for the situation. It's not something you need to apologize for, I said. It's all because of that out-of-touch president. Honestly, what was the chairman thinking, making Helena president? But keep that between us. I joked, sticking out my tongue, and Cecil gave a weak smile. It had been a while since I'd seen him smile. In fact, I realized that smiles had been rare in our department lately. How long would these days continue? The mere thought weighed heavily on my mind. Determined to break this cycle, I decided to consult someone about it. Carl, the chairman, and Helena's father. When I joined the company, Carl was the executive vice president and we occasionally chatted. Now as chairman, our interactions had ceased, but I boldly went to see Carl and frankly discussed Helena's problematic behavior, knowing it might be impertinent. He was a dignified man, a son of the previous revered chairman. I hoped he would understand the employees' struggles, but Carl's response was dismissive. I'm not here to listen to such complaints. You are to follow President Helena, work for the company, and earn your salary. That's all. It's simple. And with that, he sent me away. I realized then, Carl, who had appointed Helena as president, was just another fool. Disappointed and furious, I felt a surge of anger. The next day, Helena came again to invite Cecil to lunch, but our department was bustling with a crucial project deadline. Amidst the tense atmosphere, Helena's presence only fueled irritation, and some of my colleagues couldn't hide their annoyance. I'm sorry, I really can't leave my work today. Could you perhaps dine alone? Cecil tried to decline politely. Helena insisted. It's fine, someone else will cover for you. Hey, you there, take over Cecil's work. Unbelievably, Helena approached me and said that. Right now, both I and Cecil are swamped with work. No one in the department had the capacity to take on additional work. I'm sorry, but that's not possible. I firmly replied, to which Helena widened her eyes in disbelief. What did you just say? I heard you say you can't. Despite momentarily faltering under Helena's stern gaze, I knew I had to speak up. I said it's not possible. Cecil's tasks today are critical, and I also have a pile of my own work to complete. Taking on Cecil's responsibilities is simply out of the question. Every time you pull Cecil away, our department's progress stalls, affecting the company's performance significantly. As president, you must be aware of this. We're even getting complaints about poor responsiveness from clients, and we're losing credibility. If this continues, we'll be overtaken by our competitors. I had let out my frustrations, but there was no turning back now. Do you even know who you're talking to? You know what happens when you speak against the president, right? Helena's voice, so different from the sweet tone she used with Cecil, was filled with intimidation as she retorted. I'm speaking out of concern for the company. We're all striving to improve performance. I can't comply with actions that will hinder our success. We need Cecil at his desk right now. There was so much more I wanted to say, but I carefully chose my words, remembering she was still the president. Is that all you have to say? I'm shocked to find such a lowly employee among us. Helena sneered, snatching my employee badge to read my name. Caroline, huh? It figures you'd say such vulgar things. You're going to regret what you did today. Then, turning sweetly to Cecil, she said, Cecil, let's try again tomorrow. I'll book an Italian place. My mood's been spoiled by this silly little scene. With a fluttering wave, she left the department. As Helena disappeared, applause erupted around me. Colleagues praised me, saying how refreshing it was and how cool I'd been, but I didn't feel relieved. Helena's words weighed on me. I knew this wouldn't end without repercussions. Caroline, are you okay? Cecil, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder, looked at me with concern. Are you okay, Caroline? I know you spoke for all of us, but now you're in the president's sights. I'm on your side, though. If anything happens, I'll be here to protect you. His strong reassurance lightened my heart slightly. I was grateful for such a supportive colleague. Though Helena's retaliation might start as soon as tomorrow, with these colleagues by my side, I felt ready to face it. However, Helena's actions were more straightforward than I expected, and she showed up in our department the very next day to announce, You, at your age with no significant position, not proficient at work, just getting older and more unsightly. How dare you talk back to me? Someone who has remained a mere employee all these years is not needed in this company. Frankly, you're an eyesore. You're fired as of today. Pack your things and leave. I was astounded by the abrupt and harsh dismissal. Fired? I echoed, in disbelief. Helena, with rough breath, pulled out a piece of paper. Yes, but it's not wrongful termination. Don't bother suing. Here's your termination letter and we'll even pay severance pay. Now, hurry up and leave. As Helena ranted, That's too much, President. Caroline is our moral support, indispensable to this company. Cecil stepped up, fists clenched. Helena scoffed. Cecil, you're mistaken if you think it's good to side with such an incompetent woman. It seems you've been influenced by her because you've worked together for too long. How pitiful. She's a detriment to this company. It's only right she's fired. I stood silently, absorbing Helena's verbal abuse. Arguing with someone like her was futile. If you say my presence is detrimental to the company, then I must accept my dismissal. I replied calmly, quickly packing my belongings and leaving, though I couldn't suppress my intense anger. I was determined not to let this end here. I had already identified Helena's weakness. The next day, I welcomed a refreshing morning, had breakfast, and cleaned my house. It should be about time, I thought, glancing at the clock as it struck 10 a.m. Right on cue, my phone rang. The company's number flashed on the screen. The caller was easy to guess. It must be Helena. Slowly, I answered. Caroline, oh thank goodness you picked up. Listen, about the firing yesterday, it was just a joke. I never imagined you'd take it seriously and actually not show up today. I'll overlook your tardiness, so please come to the office as usual. Helena spoke in the same cajoling tone she used with Cecil. You're so honest, Caroline, to take such a joke seriously. Helena's voice quivered slightly. It wasn't a joke. I have the signed termination letter. Does the company sign such things as a joke? If so, that's a terribly irresponsible company. A president who flirts with male employees and publicly humiliates an employee is disgraceful. I want nothing more to do with such a company. Helena was speechless at my words, so I pressed further. I know everything that happened this morning in the office and that you'd come crying to me for help. I had heard all about it from Cecil. Today was an especially important day for presenting our company's best product to a crucial client. Success would significantly boost our company, while failure would allow competitors to leapfrog us to industry leadership. It was such an important presentation. Even Helena must have recognized this importance, as she attended the morning meeting to motivate everyone. She asked who was in charge of the presentation, but no one came forward, and the room fell silent. Of course, I was the presenter. When Helena realized this, she panicked but then asked if anyone else could handle the responsibility. But what Helena found in front of her were resignation letters from all employees. Seeing my dismissal, everyone had had enough of the company. Hearing this from Cecil, I informed Helena. Please! If you're there, Caroline, the presentation can still go ahead. We don't have much time before the meeting with a client. I'll double your salary, and you'll be treated as a director. Please come back. Please. Helena pleaded hysterically, almost incomprehensible. Unfortunately, I have no intention of returning. Please handle it yourself. As president, you haven't worked properly and have been chasing employees around, decreasing performance. I don't think you have the capacity to manage it, I said before hanging up. I dismissed her further calls without hesitation. It would be interesting to see how she managed alone. That evening, Helena and Carl came to my house. As I cautiously opened the door, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please forgive us, they pleaded tearfully. Apparently, the presentation had been a disaster. From the moment Helena arrived alone, the client must have been skeptical. Just minutes into the presentation, they stormed out, disgusted with Helena's incompetence. They said they'd reconsider if you were involved, Caroline. Please, for the company's sake, come back, Helena pleaded. My anger erupted. For the company? How can you say that? You've disrupted employees' work, fired me for speaking up, and caused everyone to turn against you due to your arrogance. This is the result of your actions. Please leave. As I attempted to close the door, Helena sprang up. It's all because you interfered with my lunches with Cecil, embarrassing me in front of everyone. That's why I fired you. You got in the way of my lunches with Cecil. That's all it was. What a childish notion. I knew it, but hearing it directly from her made me feel sick. I'm begging you to come back. Suddenly, Helena lunged at me, but was swiftly stopped by Cecil, who had come out of concern. Enough, please. I came because I was worried about Caroline, and I can't believe it's come to this, Cecil said, surprising both Helena and me. Helena, let me make it clear, dining or talking with you has been nothing but a pain because I have someone I like. I've told you many times, but you only looked at my appearance and never listened. Cecil confessed, leaving Helena paralyzed. Caroline and the other employees who resigned have already found new jobs. A competing company, looking to expand, was thrilled to hire us all. Everyone is talented, and they were delighted. Caroline and I are not coming back. You're the reason she was unfairly thrown out of the company. Please, don't show up in front of us again. If you don't leave, we'll call the police, Cecil said firmly. Helena tried to say something, but was pulled away by Carl, who was also pale. He was the fool who appointed Helena president and dismissed my desperate pleas. There's no room for sympathy. Without its supporting employees and missing a great opportunity. The company's reputation plummeted, leading to bankruptcy. I am sorry to the wonderful predecessor, but once the predecessor was gone, it was only a matter of time before it came to this. Helena and Carl disappeared, buried under immense debt. Living lives I don't even want to imagine. Meanwhile, Cecil and I began dating. The confession that I was the person he cared for came as a sweet surprise. After years of working together, our relationship evolved from trusted colleagues to partners. I'm grateful I didn't rush into marriage when I was younger, as I've now found the best partner later in life. Life is unpredictable. Maybe Cecil and I will get married. That's what I've been happily contemplating recently. Thank you for always taking care of my husband. I wrote this with a bright red permanent marker on the back of my husband who was passed out drunk. He wouldn't think that I knew about his daily affairs with younger women, under the guise of working late. But I knew everything. Suppressing the rage that made me want to claw at him, I left that message. It was a declaration of war to my husband's mistress. My husband, Darren, and I, Anita, both 38, got married 3 years ago. Both working, I mostly handle the housework since I work from home. We don't have kids, but I thought we were happily living together, a thought only I seem to have. I'll be working late tomorrow too. Don't wait up for dinner, go to sleep first. Darren, who started working late suddenly about 3 months ago. The frequency increased over time, and he started spending nights at the office twice a week. You've been working late a lot recently. You never used to. The economy's better, and we're busier. That's good, right? Yes, take care. I believed Darren's words and saw him off. But not only did Darren come home late, his attitude towards me grew colder. He used to invite me out on his days off, but now he barely spoke to me. How about we go out today? It's nice weather. I'm tired, maybe some other time. Then, let's watch a movie at home together. Not in the mood. I want some alone time, go away. Darren, barely lifting his face from his mobile phone, spoke with annoyance. On bad days, except for bathroom and meal times, he wouldn't leave his room all day. Is this all just stress from work? I was worried about Darren's changed behavior, but one day, my concern turned to suspicion. That day, Darren came home at 1 a.m., and I was still awake due to work. Anita, you're still up? I was working. Huh? The moment I took Darren's suit, I smelled an unfamiliar scent. Why does your suit smell like perfume? When I asked, Darren's face stiffened slightly as he sniffed his clothes. Then, he looked annoyed. I don't smell anything. You have hay fever, so you wouldn't notice. Yeah. Maybe it's from a female coworker who wears too much perfume. Must have rubbed off. You notice the perfume despite your severe hay fever? Well, yeah. She wears a lot. Darren's words sounded like a hasty, thoughtless excuse. Were you that close to her to smell it so strongly? I helped her when she almost fell. Darren licked his lips while saying this. A habit he had when lying. Really? You're not hiding anything from me? Stop nagging. Don't snoop around like a controlling woman. When I pressed him, Darren glared and stormed out of the living room. Is he really cheating? The next day, Darren left for work without breakfast and didn't return until after 9 p.m., ignoring all calls and messages from me. He only came back after midnight. Welcome home. I was worried. You didn't say you'd be working late today. I was swamped with work. I tried to contact you several times. At least reply to my messages. I told you I was busy. I'm going to sleep. Darren hastily retreated to the bedroom and slammed the door shut. Lately, even when going to bed, he turns his back to me, avoiding any contact. I just want to have a calm conversation. I approached the bedroom door and was about to knock. But then, I heard voices from inside and stopped. I just got home. I want to see you again, even though we just met. I want to see you too. When can you come next? Maybe I'll try to make it tomorrow too. I love you. Listening closely, I realized Darren was on a speakerphone call with a woman. He barely talks to me. Unable to hold back, I knocked and tried to listen through the door. Who are you calling at this hour? Why hide it? What are you doing, Anita? Angered, Darren swung the door open forcefully, knocking me down as I stood close by. It hurts. What are you doing? Anita, how dare you eavesdrop on my call? What a nerve! I was just curious who you were talking to at this time. I was discussing work with a colleague. But it didn't sound like that. Shut up. Always saying presumptuous things. I'll show you. Darren roughly picked me up and threw me outside the front door. Then he quickly shut the door and locked it. What are you doing? Open the door. Annoying woman in the house is just a nuisance. Stay quiet out there. This is too much, no matter what. It's your fault. Reflect on it spending the night on the ground. With those words, Darren's footsteps faded away into the house. Thrown out empty-handed, I couldn't even contact the apartment management. I had no choice but to spend the night at the entrance. The next morning, Darren came out before going to work and tossed the keys at me roughly. Did you reflect? If you learned your lesson, don't ever meddle again. After saying only what he wanted, Darren left for work without hearing my side. To be treated this badly. I can't stay silent. I'll gather evidence. A few days later, I decided to stake out his office as he claimed to be working late. Exiting the office at the regular time, Darren walked in the opposite direction of our home. Where is he going? Following him, he met up with a young, cute woman. I was shocked to see them walk arm in arm, boldly. I filmed them with my mobile phone as they entered a high-end French restaurant. When he dines with me, it's always at a family restaurant. The difference in treatment was both sad and frustrating. Suppressing my swirling emotions, I continued to watch. After their meal, they headed straight to a hotel. Now I have perfect evidence. I followed Darren several more times, gathering more evidence. It turned out, on days he said he was working late, he spent hours in a hotel, and nights he claimed to be staying over at work, he was at his mistress's house. I'll be at the office all night working tomorrow. Every day must be really tough. I bought some good wine today, how about we relax a bit? Since being thrown outside, I've been compliant, which seemed to please Darren, who happily agreed to a drink in the evening. Then he guzzled down the expensive wine and quickly got drunk. Thank you for always taking care of my husband. It's perfect. I wrote this message with bright red pen on Darren's back, partly as a declaration of war to his mistress. It seemed to have an effect because around 11 p.m. the next night, I received a call from Darren, who never initiates contact. Did he realize? Is this about the mistress? Wondering if it was Darren or his mistress. I nervously pressed the call button on my mobile phone. I'm so sorry. A woman's voice. I didn't recognize whose voice it was. So loud it crackled through the phone, making me pull it away from my ear. What? I'm really sorry. The mistress sounded panicked, not like she was making a hasty apology. I was surprised. This was not what I had expected. You didn't know about him? Yes. I wouldn't have been with him if I knew he was married. That's unfortunate. Her name is Lorna, a 28-year-old receptionist at Darren's client company. Deceiving a woman like this is the worst. I'm in shock. He even proposed to me. What? We were planning our wedding, looking at venues. I was so excited until I found the message in the shower room. She scrubbed off the message with a body brush as she would wash his back, pretending to feel sick, and went to bed early. I panicked thinking I couldn't marry him. After he slept, I checked his phone and saw your messages, realizing you were his wife. I didn't think you were unaware. I'm sorry for scaring you. No, I should apologize for what I did, even unknowingly. No need to apologize. You were promised marriage, you're a victim too. Betrayed by Darren, and to think he deceived such a genuine girl. I've never felt so disgusted with someone. In my heart, I decided to end my relationship with Darren. I'm going to divorce him. You should break up with him too. I want to, but I transferred about $10,000 to his account for our wedding expenses. Really? If our marriage was a lie, where's that money? Maybe he really planned to marry you? I don't want to marry such a terrible person. I want to get my money back and cut ties. That's better. But let's make him truly reflect on his actions. I couldn't let this go unchallenged. Thinking of a plan, I came up with an idea. Can you help me with something? Anything. Actually, I have a secret I haven't told Darren. She was obviously angry and shared a secret she kept from Darren. Thus, we joined forces to teach Darren a lesson. We secretly communicated and meticulously prepared. Over the next 2 weeks, the day of our retaliation arrived finally. I'll be working late again today. Might even stay overnight. You're always working hard. Take care not to overdo it. I smiled and saw Darren off, then contacted Lorna and went to her place to wait. Then, around 6 p.m., the doorbell of her house rang. I'm home. Work was exhausting today. Welcome back, Darren. Huh? When I appeared from the living room, Darren jumped as if he had seen a ghost. Dinner? Bath? Or divorce? Smiling, I thrust the divorce papers at him, making Darren drop his bag in panic. Anita, why are you here? Let's sit down and talk about it. Come, let's go to the living room. What are you plotting? You didn't do anything to Lorna, did you? Just come quickly. Okay. Seemingly shocked by my loud voice since I was a compliant recently, Darren hurried into the living room. There, Lorna sat on the sofa with a broad smile. Lorna, what is this all about? That's our line. How could you promise marriage to me when you have a wife? Well, let's hear the full story, shall we? I sat next to Lorna and Darren sat in front of us. I began interrogating Darren. He finally seemed to give in. Lorna was just a bit of fun. I was interested in younger girls. Gross. You're attractive too. But you know, eating the same thing every time gets boring, right? Sometimes you want to try something different. I'm disgusted. And why were you cold to me if that's the case? That's because I thought if I was cold to you, you'd be more devoted. I was too stunned by his reasoning to speak. Taking my place, Lorna glared at Darren. If you weren't serious about me, why did you promise to marry me? I thought marriage meant you'd give me money. Give me back my money. That's impossible. I've already spent it all. Are you kidding? What did you spend it on? I treated colleagues to slightly expensive lunches to be liked at work. And what else? I bought expensive coats and shoes to impress clients. To think you spent my savings on such things. I'll never forgive you. Lorna muttered in a low voice. I'll have you arrested for marriage fraud. What? Isn't that an overreaction for something like this? Additionally, I'm demanding $30,000 in compensation and $10,000 for the savings you spent. Wait a minute! This is too harsh! Darren's face turned pale with panic. Watching him, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. Anita, say something! Just accept the arrest quietly. I meant to Lorna. If your husband gets arrested, it'll be trouble, right? Not at all. I'm getting divorced anyway. At the moment Darren heard the word divorce from me, his face turned even paler. Divorce? You're joking, right? Why would I stay married to a cheating fraudster like you? You think you can live on your own after being a comfortable housewife all this time? I'm not just a housewife, I work from home. I can live perfectly fine without you. You mean you were actually working at home? I thought you were just pretending. Darren looked at me with surprise. I'm also demanding $30,000 in alimony for your infidelity. I can't pay anymore. What am I supposed to do if the amount increases? You'll have to work hard, I guess. You'll probably be fired from your current job though. Lorna is actually the daughter of the vice president of your client company. What? I thought she was just a receptionist. That was the secret she hadn't told Darren. I kept it hidden because I thought it'd be difficult to date if you knew my position. I've already informed her father about everything. Of course, your company knows too. I had already reported to Darren's boss about his marriage fraud with the receptionist and that a police report was filed, and his arrest was imminent. But I'm capable at work. Even if I get arrested, I'll have chances to keep working. There's no way they'll keep you. As soon as the facts are confirmed, you'll be disciplined by the company. Almost certainly fired. That's impossible. Darren held his head, making a face as if to say I'm in despair. It was nauseating. Lorna, let's get married after I divorce Anita. Then it won't be fraud, right? I refuse. Anita, let's start over. We can overcome this and become a real couple. Your jokes should be only that silly face of yours. Lorna and I kicked out the pitifully clinging Darren from the house and celebrated with a high five. Later, Darren and I divorced, and I demanded the planned alimony. Darren was found guilty of marriage fraud from Lorna's report. She also claimed alimony and damages. After being fired and burdened with a huge debt, it's hard for a criminal to find employment. Even his parents disowned him, and he now lives and works at a quite terrible workplace. Lorna and I became friends. We occasionally enjoy drinks together and have fun. I thought it would be a piece of cake. I, being younger, could make him happier. She declared, arriving at the apartment where Mike and I lived a happy life. Standing beside her was Mike, with a grin on his face. To dispel this nightmare, I had to take action. I'm Lucy, a 26-year-old housewife. My husband, Mike, is 28 and works in sales at a printing company. I'm currently working part-time at a bookstore. Before getting married, I did various temp jobs and worked as a temporary government employee. But after marriage, I chose to work part-time. I'm not the most versatile person, so juggling a full-time job and household chores seemed impossible. Part-time work, along with housekeeping, feels just right for me. When Mike and I first met, he was unemployed. He had quit his job within just 6 months of starting at a company right after graduating from college. It was during his job search that he met me. During his job hunt, our paths crossed at the workforce center. I was working there as a temporary employee. Mike was the client I happened to assist at the reception. My first impression of him was that he was extremely friendly and charming. I immediately thought he'd be perfect in sales and recommended a few sales jobs. I remember feeling relieved when one of the jobs I recommended, at a printing company, turned out to be a success for Mike. When he came to report his employment with a beaming smile, I found myself unexpectedly smitten by him. Mike's face is cute. But at the same time he's tall, and the unexpected contrast seemed wonderful. He came to report his job acceptance just before lunch break, so as soon as the break started, I looked for Mike and stopped him. I remember it took a lot of courage to do that. Mike was about to leave the workforce center at that moment. I approached him as he seemed to be pondering over something, staring at his mobile phone screen by the entrance. Mike looked surprised when I spoke to him. I think my hands were trembling when I asked if we could exchange contact information. Mike's response was simply, "I'd like that too." I blushed, but so did Mike, his face as red as mine. We exchanged contacts, and that marked the beginning of our relationship. Mike, working in sales at the printing company, and I got married 2 months after we exchanged numbers. Our friends teased us for our whirlwind marriage. But I always thought, if I were to marry, it could only be Mike. When we got married, we bought an apartment as our new home. I thought it was a bold decision at the time, but now I believe it was the right choice. I was living the best marital life with Mike, my beloved, in our comfortable home. The change in our life came about 2 years after our marriage. I think it was around the time when Mike's job began to feel more stable. "Do you think I'm kind of cute?" Mike suddenly asked. Considering he never seemed interested in his own appearance, I immediately sensed someone must have mentioned it to him. "Yes, you're kind of cute. Did someone say that to you?" I asked. Laughing, Mike said it was a comment from a new employee. I thought it was quite inappropriate for someone who had just joined the company to say such a thing. Mike, not entirely displeased, said, "Cute, huh?" while looking in the mirror. I told Mike to be more careful since he was being teased by younger people. Following that incident, Mike began to pay more attention to his clothes and skincare. His spending increased, and so did the bills on our credit card. When he came home from work, he would constantly hold on to his mobile phone. I started suspecting infidelity. Once I started thinking that way, it was all downhill from there. I began to doubt everything Mike did. Our good relationship until then perhaps made the backlash stronger. Although Mike appeared more buoyant than before, he didn't seem to hide it from me, which was a bit reassuring. I thought if he had something to hide, he would act suspiciously. But I was being naive. Mike's spending habits were getting worse day by day. I decided to have a serious talk with him during dinner. I told him that we should save money now, as we'll need more when we have kids. Mike didn't seem to grasp the seriousness. I emphasized it even more. Without any evidence of Mike's infidelity, I watched him become increasingly youthful in appearance and lived in frustration. But soon, the situation took a dramatic turn. I was in a hurry one morning to hang the laundry on the balcony before leaving for my part-time job. That's when I noticed someone standing in front of our apartment, looking my way. A woman in her early 20s, it seemed. Moreover, she appeared to be filming me with her mobile phone. For a moment, our eyes met through her mobile phone, and I felt a chill of fear. I quickly went back inside the house from the balcony. Even though I hadn't done anything wrong, my heart was racing. I thought she must be Mike's mistress. Maybe she came to spy on me, the wife. The next day, I was stopped by the owner at the entrance. He warned me about a woman who seemed to be inquiring about me. She was asking how much our apartment cost, whether Mike and I were happily married, and had been gathering information around the apartment. It was the same as being publicly announced that I was being cheated by Mike. Reaching my limit, I finally confronted Mike. "You've been glued to your mobile phone lately. Who are you waiting to hear from?" I asked. Mike responded, "It's just work." I told him about the encounter with the apartment owner, pretending not to know. "There seems to be a woman snooping around our home. Do you know anything about this?" Mike's hand, holding his phone, began to tremble slightly. Sweat appeared on his forehead, even though it wasn't hot. Just as I was about to press him further, the intercom rang. I answered it, reluctantly, and there she was, the woman, smiling on the screen. I was momentarily stunned. "She's a client of mine. She has something to discuss with you," Mike said. He unlocked the door and welcomed her in. The woman who appeared at the door seemed younger than I had imagined. Almost like a high school student. She was introduced as an office worker dispatched to Mike's company. She held Mike's hand, smiling broadly, and her lack of common sense startled me. Then she declared, "I'm dating Mike." To me. And then she announced to me. While I stood there, stunned, the two of them looked at each other and laughed, holding each other's hands. "You're less important to me than she is." "I want to start over with Betty," Mike said, sounding like a victim. I felt my blood boil at his words. The two seemed to be reveling in their own tragedy, and Betty was even shedding tears as she looked at me. Mike then hurled cruel words at me. He said our marriage was a mistake, that it was too hasty, and we hadn't thought it through. Finally, he even said he thought it was a mistake to have loved me. He claimed he became his true self thanks to her. His words, like poison, made me feel dizzy. However, I sensed Mike was avoiding a decisive statement. He didn't want to be the one to say divorce. I could feel the two of them waiting for me to bring it up. "Fine. I don't want anything. Let's get divorced," I said, raising my hands in surrender. Mike relaxed his shoulders in relief at my words. Betty looked at Mike with joy. "Thank you. I thought it would be easy since you looked older than Mike described. It's only natural for someone younger like me to make Mike happier. It's right for you to step aside," Betty said, without a hint of malice. Maybe she really didn't mean any harm. But to the one hearing it, those words could only be taken as malicious. I was incredibly irritated. Our marriage was quick, but the divorce proceedings were even quicker. I spent an unbelievable day filing for divorce with Mike's mistress, Betty. Now that the divorce papers are filed, technically, Mike and I are strangers to each other. The buoyant couple apparently reserved a luxury hotel for tonight. I'm alone in the apartment, packing my things. I told Mike I didn't want anything. I didn't ask for any property division, but I decided to claim alimony. No need for child support, as we don't have kids. Though she's paying me alimony, it seems like Mike will end up paying for her share too. Right after filing the divorce papers, as we were parting, Betty said, "Please leave that apartment soon. Mike and I will be living there, so a middle-aged woman should vacate quickly." She said it in a sickly sweet voice, arm in arm with Mike. It irritated me greatly, but I kept my composure. Smiling outwardly, I vowed revenge against them in my heart. I left the apartment that I shared with Mike as soon as I packed my belongings. I've left everything else to my lawyer. I made Mike and her sign an agreement not to contact me after the divorce. I almost laughed, remembering how happily they signed it. A month passed, and just when I thought it was about time, my mobile phone rang. It was Mike calling. Knowing he must be panicking, I deliberately took my time answering. "What? You signed an agreement not to contact me." "I don't want to hear from you now," I said. "What do you mean? $2,000 a month for the apartment? $1,500 for credit repayments? How am I supposed to pay this every month?" Mike must be holding the credit statement and the apartment payment request right now. I always managed our finances during our marriage. I was in charge of the account into which Mike's salary was deposited. When we decided to buy the apartment, Mike showed no interest in the monthly repayments. How much did he think we needed each month? Mike's take-home pay is about $1,700. It's not an amount he can afford to pay every month. "That's why I kept telling you not to waste money," I said. "But we were supposed to be living off my salary. It's impossible with just a part-time job." Mike was almost crying, in a state of disarray. His life was turned upside down. Indeed, I have a part-time job. But unknown to Mike, I had another job. I've been blogging about my daily life and have continued streaming since before we got married. Mike didn't know, but I've also published a book. I earn more than Mike's salary every month. The part-time job was just for show. Mike was under the illusion that he was covering all expenses with his salary. I relinquished my rights to the property and handed over the apartment to Mike for this reason. Alimony from Mike, covering Betty's alimony, the remaining credit payments, and monthly apartment installments. Mike's finances must have tightened significantly. I could hear Betty's voice in the background. What's going on? I didn't know we were paying installments. She seemed to be causing a ruckus. I even heard the sound of a cup breaking. Then shamelessly, Mike asked me for help. He couldn't maintain his life with his salary alone and wanted me to help with the apartment installments. Unbelievable. What? Don't be ridiculous. Work hard and support each other with your young, pretty girlfriend. I mocked him and hung up. I immediately blocked Mike's number. I had kept it unblocked just for this day. Now, I no longer needed Mike's number. Deleting his contact felt refreshing. Later, I heard that Mike and Betty couldn't maintain the apartment and had to put it up for sale quickly. Betty, who married Mike immediately after our divorce, learned about his real salary and started claiming, "It's a scam, I was deceived," leading to a lawsuit. It seems she's accusing him of fraud for misrepresenting his financial situation during marriage. Probably, Mike just didn't know about his own financial situation. Mike is working a side job at night after his main job, just to make the payments. Betty divorced Mike quickly. I moved to the countryside, which I had always wanted, and continue my graceful country living blog. I'm preparing to start a YouTube channel next month. Being broke and useless is grounds for divorce. So said Matthew as he left the divorce papers on the table and walked out. I was left staring at those papers, dumbfounded, on my hospital bed. I had my suspicions for a while. But, to think he was actually cheating. And he's leaving me because I'm useless and can't earn money while hospitalized and because Alyson's pregnant? Mom? Startled, I looked up to find my precious son Harlan and my dad standing there. My dad looked at what I was holding and frowned. What are you going to do? There's only one thing to do. With some persuasion, I managed an early discharge and headed to the bank where Matthew works. My dad, who drove me there, cheered me on. You can do it. Then he dropped me off in front of the bank and drove away. As I entered the bank, Matthew, noticing me, frowned. Coincidentally, there were no other customers in front of Matthew. I approached him directly. I'm closing all the company accounts. What? Let's show him whose daughter he's angered. While Matthew turned pale, I couldn't help but smirk. I am Sabrina. A 32-year-old corporate executive and mother of one. I have a 7-year-old son named Harlan and my husband's name is Matthew. Matthew and I met at a party thrown by mutual friends during our college days. Back then, we had no interest in each other and merely exchanged contact information. Hey, weren't you at that party? Sabrina, right? Oh, Matthew? The following year, by coincidence, I used the bank where he worked and we reconnected. That led to us keeping in touch regularly and eventually started dating. After I got pregnant with Harlan, we got married. Matthew was known for his serious and meticulous work, which made my friends envy that I had him as my husband. I, too, was happy to have married him. Mom, why does this become this? Hold on a sec. I don't know that much myself, so I'll look into it. Okay. Harlan, perhaps inheriting traits from Matthew, is studious and curious. He's always asking questions, which keeps me on my toes with my own studies. What's this? Why? Surprisingly, Harlan's admiration is not for Matthew but for my dad. My mother passed away from illness, and my dad, despite his busy work life, raised me as a single parent. I'm sorry, but it's hard to get along with your dad. Well, it can't be helped, but don't say that to him. He's quite sensitive about it. No way, I could. My dad is a kind man but looks intimidating and somewhat scary. Matthew is also not comfortable around him due to his appearance. My dad, aware of this, has always tried not to interfere too much. Thus, our life was peaceful at the beginning, a life that seemed full of promise. But that changed drastically after we got married. Hey! Where did you put my mobile phone? Don't say it like I'm responsible for it. Isn't it still on the charger? Right after waking up, Matthew would ask grumpily. Indeed, his mobile phone was where he left it charging the night before. No apologies or thanks from him, just a click of his tongue, which irritated me. Matthew changed after we got married. And whenever he had the chance, he would say this. I'm an elite banker. Thanks to me, you're living a comfortable life. Yet Matthew doesn't contribute financially at home. He spends his entire salary on himself, yet acts as if he's supporting the household. In reality, I'm the one supporting our family. I pay for all the utilities and groceries. Hey! What's with these new clothes? They're for Harlan. He's outgrown his old ones. Don't spend my money on luxuries. I'm paying with my own salary. I don't even have access to your account. Yet, if I take Harlan out for a meal or buy new clothes, he immediately complains. He seems to dislike any form of luxury, no matter how small. On the other hand, my dad is the type of person who's willing to spend money for our sake. The apartment you're in now is too small, right? That's why I bought the condo you and Matthew wanted to live in. And it's not far from my place, so I could be close with you guys. He said, laughing, and gave us the top floor as a gift. And to be there for us in times of need, he lives on a different floor in the same building. Mom, can I go to Grandpa's? Of course, but just because it's the same building doesn't mean you can stay out late. Make sure you come back before it gets dark. Okay. It might be natural for Harlan to be closer to his grandfather than his father, Matthew. Whenever he has the chance, Harlan goes to see my dad. Where's Harlan? At Dad's place. Is that so? Matthew never complains about my dad to him directly. And it seems he's careful not to say too much around Harlan, fearing he might tell my dad. It's just me he's bold with. Certainly, I keep quiet not to trouble my dad. Well, if it's just complaints, I can ignore them. That's how lightly I thought of it as. And so unlike my dad, Matthew doesn't participate in childcare at all. I've been called out by Alyson, so I'm heading out. What? Again? And it's Matthew's childhood friend Alyson who's stealing away his time from childcare. I dislike her, more than just being uncomfortable around her. Matthew and I are like siblings. So please don't misunderstand. Every time she meets me, she would say something like that. Yet, she always tries to assert her dominance. Matthew used to be. As if she knows Matthew better than I do, which is just annoying. Valeria, Matthew's mother-in-law, also dotes on Alyson, which complicates things further. Why did Matthew choose such a woman instead of Alyson? He should have married Alyson. When called to my in-laws, Valeria made sure to say such things loud enough for me to hear. John, my father-in-law, always scolds her for it, but she doesn't seem to care. Alyson claims to be a natural airhead. I'm just a natural airhead, that's why I rely on Matthew so much. I don't mean to make Sabrina uncomfortable. This might be okay if she were younger. But she's 28, not exactly young. It's time she acted her age. The reason she and Matthew didn't end up together is because of John. I don't want such a woman even as an in-law. If it really comes down to it, I'll divorce you. Alyson can hardly be called as a good person. She's notorious for playing around with men and doesn't work either. Whatever she wants, she gets Matthew to buy for her. John despises Alyson and strongly opposed their relationship. I could never understand why Valeria adores Alyson so much. I'm sorry for my wife's behavior. It's not something you should apologize for, John. Matthew too. To not defend his wife from such remarks, and instead, being friendly with such a woman. True to John's words, no matter what Valeria says about me, Matthew never defends me. Sometimes, he even laughs. Why do you say those things, Grandma? If Mom and Dad hadn't met, I wouldn't be born. Does that mean I'm an unwanted child to you, Grandma? No, that's not true at all. Harlan always stands up for me in place of Matthew. Harlan may not understand how children are made, but he knows they can't be born without both parents. Valeria adores her brilliant grandson, so she refrains from making such remarks in front of Harlan. In that aspect, Valeria and Matthew are very alike, making it seem they really are related. I have plans to drink with Alyssa tonight, so I'll be home late. Oh, really? Gradually, I started to wonder if Matthew was necessary for us at all. And I began preparing for divorce. Harlan seemed to sense something too. If there's anything I can help with, just let me know, he said, showing concern for me. Then, I was summoned by Valeria. I really didn't want to go, but she kept calling persistently enough that it would affect my work if I didn't show up. John is away on business, so there's no one to carry heavy things. Can you buy some rice? Apparently, John was on a business trip. I wanted to tell her to just order it online, but saying that would clearly lead to an argument. After being tasked with carrying heavy items after work, I was exhausted. As I was heading back to the condo in a daze, my body was thrown by a car. It seems a car that ran a red light hit me. The driver who hit you fled the scene, and we're currently investigating, I was informed while lying in a hospital bed. For now, I left Harlan in my father's care and decided to stay in the hospital for a while. I broke my arm, so I couldn't work properly in this state. When I was being worried about such things, my dad scolded me. First, worry about your own health. Harlan, my father, and John, who came back in a hurry after hearing about the accident, visited me frequently, but Matthew and Valeria did not visit me at all. Well, that was within my expectations. Coming in. What? So, I was surprised when Matthew showed up in my hospital room. Sign this. Matthew presented me with divorce papers. Already signed by him, with Valeria's name as a witness. With that arm, you won't be able to work. Now that you can't make money, you're useless to me. What is that supposed to mean? And besides, Alyssa is pregnant with my child. My thoughts froze at those words. Alyssa is pregnant with Matthew's child. I'm going to marry Alyssa. So just sign this quickly. Saying that, Matthew turned his back on me. As if I was of no further use to him. Being broke and useless is grounds for divorce, Matthew said as he left the divorce papers on the table and walked out. I was left staring at those papers, dumbfounded, on my hospital bed. I had my suspicions for a while. But, to think he was actually cheating. And he's leaving me because I'm useless and can't earn money while hospitalized and because Alyssa's pregnant? Mom? Startled, I looked up to find my precious son Harlan and my dad standing there. My dad looked at what I was holding and frowned. What are you going to do? There's only one thing to do, I answered while looking straight at my dad. My dad nodded in agreement. Well then, let's fight back. With some persuasion, I managed an early discharge and headed to the bank where Matthew works. My dad, who drove me there, cheered me on. You can do it. Then he dropped me off in front of the bank and drove away. As I entered the bank, Matthew, noticing me, frowned. Coincidentally, there were no other customers in front of Matthew. I approached him directly. I'm closing all the company accounts. What? Matthew's expression clearly said, what are you talking about? Without taking a number, I stood directly at the counter, noticing a few annoyed glances from others. Oh, excuse me. Maybe you didn't understand without the company name. What are you? I'm Sabrina Gibney. I recently took over my father and became the CEO. The company is Gibney Corporation. What the? Gibney Corporation is an IT company my father founded, now employing 1,900 staffs. And is quite well known in this area and within the industry due to its rapid growth in one generation. That's why Matthew was so surprised. That's a lie, right? You're just trying to get back at me. If you think so, why don't you check? Matthew started checking something immediately at my words. While he was busy, I looked around. Having mentioned the company name, the surrounding people were now paying attention to us. Oh my God, what? No way. It seemed he had confirmed it. Matthew looked up at me hesitantly. You're really from that Jibney Corporation? Let's show him whose daughter he has angered. Contrary to Matthew's pale face, I smirked unpleasantly. That's right, so please proceed with the cancellation quickly. Wait, if you cancel all at once like this. By the way, my father is quite angry about this matter as well. Quickly pack your things and leave the apartment. What? Why should I be the one to leave? It seems Matthew had forgotten that the apartment was purchased by my father, and the ownership was in my father's name. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought Alyssa in while I was hospitalized and still be living there. Forgot? That apartment was bought by my father, the former president. You haven't contributed any money, let alone for living expenses. You've been spending everything on your childhood friend and mistress, Alyssa. In fact, you've been living on my salary. Who do you think has been supporting your lifestyle? Well, about that. And now, because she's pregnant, you expect me to hand over the apartment to you and your mistress? How much more do you intend to insult me? I made sure to speak loudly enough for those around to hear. And of course, Matthew was flustered. After all, he's known for being serious. That he, of all people, wouldn't contribute financially at home and was cheating with a childhood friend. The looks we received from those around us turned cold. Is that true? What? The one who approached me was Ogden, the branch manager of this bank. He had been here for a while, listening to our conversation. I believe we need to have a detailed discussion. I am very sorry for the inconvenience caused by our bank employee. And with that, Ogden offered a deep apology. Following this, I was taken to the back to discuss further with Matthew, Ogden, and myself. There, I explained the situation to Ogden in detail. I am terribly sorry for the trouble our employee has caused. Ogden sighed deeply and apologized again. Next to him, Matthew sat looking displeased, and to that, Ogden forcibly grabbed his head to make him apologize. I understand your feelings, Sabrina. It's natural not to want to entrust your money to a bank that employs such people. If you're considering closing your account, we can arrange that. I am no longer his wife. If you accept one condition, I might reconsider closing the account. The two of them looked up hopefully at my words. It was a good deal for Ogden, but the worst possible condition for Matthew. If you fire Matthew here, I would like to continue my contract with this bank. What? Of course. We were actually planning to let him go. It seemed Ogden had already intended to do so. Matthew, initially confused, gradually turned red in the face. As he was about to say something. Excuse me, but Sabrina's father has arrived. Another bank employee approached us. I had asked Ogden to let him in, thwarting Matthew, who, frustrated, closed his mouth. Why do I have to be here? What? Mom? Sorry for making you wait. Dad entered, firmly holding Valeria's arm. Valeria, looking displeased, glared at me upon seeing me. This is your doing. What are you trying to accomplish? I'll never forgive you for treating your mother-in-law like this. Quiet. As Valeria began to shout, my dad fiercely scolded her. Giving an even more intimidating look, he managed to silence them. I know you've been harassing my daughter. Calling her for trivial tasks, making her carry heavy things. Despite this, instead of showing gratitude, you prefer to listen, and you made sure my daughter heard it. And Matthew, far from defending, laughed, and even Harlan had to step in to protect her. My dad's angry voice echoed through the bank. Matthew tried to intervene but remained silent under my dad's stern gaze. And I'm aware that Alyssa is the one who hit Sabrina. That woman has already been arrested by the police. Could Alyssa really have done such a thing? Why are you surprised? You're the mastermind. My dad scolded at her even more. Meanwhile, Matthew, seemingly unaware, froze in shock. What? You both are the worst. Sabrina, let's go. Yes. Prompted by my dad, we headed outside. Ogden followed, apologizing repeatedly. Thinking I might continue the contract with Ogden in charge, we heard Matthew and Valeria arguing loudly behind us. It seemed they were blaming each other. Their voices could be heard outside, and the customers and bank employees who were present whispered that what they had heard was true. Just as planned. Yes. They reacted just as we expected, which helped. Our plan had gone smoothly, and we left the bank laughing confidently. As a result, Matthew was indeed fired. Thanks to the police conducting a thorough investigation, Alyson received a prison sentence. As for Valeria, she was forced to divorce John after it was discovered she had instigated Alyson to run me over in an attempt to get rid of me. Valeria was also taken into custody by the police. Welcome back, Mom, Grandpa. I'm home. Thank you for looking after Harlan, John. No problem. Seems like you've settled everything at the bank. After cornering Matthew and his accomplices at the bank, I went to pick up Harlan, whom I had left with John. John had helped a lot this time too. He found evidence that Valeria was instigating Alyson and discovered notes about their plan to eliminate me, which he handed over to the police. When I thanked him for everything, John said with a smile, "You did great." Since then, my days have become busier than ever. Being busy as a next-in-line president and a board member already, becoming president has added even more responsibility on me due to Matthew. And as for my dad, he started a new company. I've always wanted to start a new company, he said, pushing the presidency onto me, eager to show Matthew up. Because of that, both my father and I became busy, so John has been looking after Harlan. Apparently, John's business trip was forced upon him because Valeria was having an affair with his boss. He took early retirement and moved into a vacant apartment in our building. I'm currently studying about remote work. Planning to eventually entrust him with work, I've sent someone knowledgeable his way. He seems very capable, so I'd like him to excel in my new company. It seems my dad and John got along very well after this incident, often visiting each other's apartments to drink and chat. On the other hand, Matthew, having been driven out, returned to his empty family home. Unable to find employment at any bank with rumors spread by my dad and I everywhere, he was left unemployable, forced to pay me compensation through debts. Now, spending his days tirelessly working part-time jobs, he came crying to us, but we collectively ignored him. Once rumored to be on the fast track to becoming a branch manager, he has fallen far. When I grow up, I want to be like Grandpa. Harlan has come to respect my dad even more after this incident. Seeing him as a hero for rescuing us from the malicious acts of Matthew and Valeria. Would you take over for Grandpa someday? Yes. Hearing Harlan's willingness to follow in his footsteps, my dad was overjoyed. Determined not to be outdone by my father, I resolved to work even harder. Eventually, both my company and my father's company settled down. Oh, welcome home, Mom. Welcome back, looks like you worked hard. When I come home exhausted, I find John had already prepared dinner for us. I helped today too. Really? That's great, Harlan. I'm looking forward to dinner. Praising Harlan's effort with a smile, my dad also returned home late. Then, the four of us sat around the dining table, chatting and eating dinner together. In stark contrast to us, Matthew and his accomplices were scattered. Matthew piled up debts upon debts, eventually becoming indebted to a loan shark. And I heard rumors he was put on a ship. Matthew's family home was sold to pay off his debts, and Valeria, now without a place to go, was spotted living under a bridge by an acquaintance. By the way, I received an apology letter from Alyson's parents. They're good people, I hope you'll read it. If you say so, John. According to the letter from Alyson's parents, she gave birth in prison. They took the child in, and after Alyssa's release, they moved away to ensure she wouldn't rely on them. The letter contained deep apologies to me. Alyssa's parents seem like very good people. I sincerely hope the child grows up to resemble their grandparents rather than their parents. Nonetheless, Alyssa too has lost a place to return to. I hope she reflects on her sins in her solitude. Time passed by and it had been 10 years since the divorce. We've grown without being troubled by Matthew. Did I even have a dad? Apparently, he vaguely remembers Matthew's existence but considers irrelevant to his life. And I too have completely forgotten about his existence. I've decided to take over Grandpa's company after all. If that's what you've decided, I won't object. Harlan chose to inherit my dad's company, which was originally a company making toys. Starting as an ordinary employee, Harlan is valued for his constant flow of ideas. Maybe it's time to leave the company in Harlan's hands. My dad would say so in a laugh. Once he hands over the company to Harlan, he plans to live a quiet life in the countryside. I'm also finding a successor and teaching them my job earnestly. Once they've grown enough, I too might consider early retirement and start a new path. With that thought of future in mind, I will continue to work as the CEO.
Return my wallet right now! How dare you! The woman screaming at the entrance no longer seemed human. She was the worst kind of woman, referring to my beloved eldest son as a mere wallet. Nancy, who had emotionally and physically exhausted Scott, was the worst. Trembling with anger beside me, Scott stood, looking frail and frightened. David, protecting his brother, gazed at Nancy with an icy stare. Before I could speak, David quietly asked, facing the entrance, "Emma, do you also see Dad just as a wallet? Depending on your answer, I might not forgive you." David was looking intently at Nancy's granddaughter, Emma, standing beside her. Beside the arrogant Nancy, Emma looked away, her eyes darting. I held David back and told Emma, "If you think of Dad as just a wallet, then Grandma is your enemy too." Emma's face turned pale, and she burst into tears, apologizing. She then ran towards me, away from Nancy. Betrayed by Emma, Nancy's eyebrows raised in fury. Nancy had never even manipulated her granddaughter to enslave Scott. "Nancy, I will never forgive you!" In front of a pale-faced Scott and a calm David, I declared, "My name is Violet. I'm 65 and I divorced my husband when I was young. We had 2 sons together, but I was the one who raised them. I've worked at a local accounting firm for many years. Having worked there even before my divorce, I had a stable income. My ex-husband used to complain that I lacked charm. By the time I was pregnant with my second son, our relationship had already soured. And during my second pregnancy, my ex-husband started an affair with another woman. I lost all patience with him. After the divorce, I relentlessly demanded alimony and child support from him. I don't even want to remember his face. He was a dreamer, not the brightest, a despicable man who ran off with another woman. Scott and David were born from such a terrible ex-husband. Scott and David were brothers, but with a 6-year age difference. David was born a year before our divorce. We became a single-parent family, but I worked hard so we were financially stable. Scott was naive and initially missed his father. David, just a baby at the time of the divorce, had no memories of his father. After becoming a single parent, I juggled childcare and work to the best of my ability. Scott was a dreamer like his father, naive about the world. In contrast, David had a sharp personality just like me. Scott and David were polar opposites, but parenting them brought out strange feelings in me. I couldn't help but be lenient with Scott, who resembled my ex-husband. Scott was kind and innocent, but not exactly bright. Yet he looked so adorable, like an angel. David was truly a carbon copy of me, a calm personality with excellent grades, my pride and joy. But David was also thoughtful of his mother and his brother. Scott was somewhat intimidated by his younger brother David. David couldn't leave his brother Scott alone and often helped him. Ours was a single-parent family, but Scott and David had a good brotherly bond, bringing joy to our lives. Scott, perhaps due to the trauma of my divorce, never dated women. Struggling with academics, he got a job right after high school. David went to a prestigious university, acknowledged by everyone. Scott proudly spoke of David as his beloved brother. We both, I and David, dearly loved Scott for his pure and honest nature. However, our peaceful family life changed with Scott's words.
"Mom, David, I got married."
He met his wife at a work party. Inexperienced in relationships, Scott was smitten with her. That woman was Nancy, and they were already married by the time he told us. I was shocked by Scott's abrupt marriage, but David remained calm.
"A woman that Scott falls for. I'm curious to meet her."
David's words were tinged with unmistakable sarcasm. The wise David could see through Scott's harshness easily. When Nancy came for the marriage introduction, she was beautiful. But that was all. Nancy, now my eldest son's wife, told me and David, "Violet, David, I'll make Scott happy." When we saw Nancy, David and I exchanged knowing glances. This woman, beautiful, but seemed a bit strong-willed. That was our first impression of Nancy. As expected, Nancy turned out to be terrifying. Scott, after marrying her, experienced this firsthand. After Scott got married, David graduated from college and landed a job at a large corporation. I was relieved that both my sons had successfully left the nest. But that feeling of relief was short-lived. Just as David was planning to move out from our home, I was involved in an accident. On my way home from the accounting firm, I collided with a motorcycle. Thankfully, I wasn't severely injured, but I was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. David immediately came to the hospital, and seeing that I was safe, he was relieved.
"Thank goodness. It wasn't a serious accident. Mom, what about Scott?"
The hospital informed him, but he has Emma to take care of. At the time, our granddaughter Emma was a toddler. Scott was busy with childcare and couldn't easily come to the hospital. I thought so, but David seemed suspicious. When I asked him what was on his mind, he said in a dissatisfied tone,
"It's strange that Scott didn't rush her when Mom had an accident."
"Now that you mention it, it's odd that the kind-hearted Scott didn't rush over when I was taken away in an ambulance. The same Scott who would always ask with concern,
"Mom, are you okay?"
whenever I looked even slightly unwell. David took care of the hospital formalities and the various treatment costs. The motorcycle driver was very apologetic and promised to cover all the medical expenses. Leaving all the insurance procedures to David, Scott was nowhere to be seen. I stayed in the hospital for a few days for tests, but Scott only came the day before I was discharged. David was about to get angry at Scott, but stopped at the last moment. Seeing Scott, I understood why David calmed his anger. Scott looked worse than me, who was hospitalized. Forgetting his anger, David asked Scott,
"Scott, are you feeling unwell? You look pale."
Concerned, David turned to Scott, who smiled weakly.
"Emma had terrible tantrums. I haven't slept in days."
When Scott apologized for not being able to come to the hospital, I asked him, "What about Nancy? Even if Emma throws tantrums, Nancy should be taking care of her, right?" Scott only replied,
"Nancy is tired."
But after I was discharged, Nancy came to our house without any guilt. "Violet, I was so worried." Nancy looked fine. She brought Emma, but just left her watching videos on her mobile phone. I started to worry. Had Scott gotten involved with the terrible woman? David seemed to agree and postponed his plans to move out. Time passed. Scott and Nancy were now 36 and David was 30. I'm still working at the accounting firm. David, young for his position, had been promoted to a manager at the large corporation. Scott stopped coming home altogether. Neither Nancy nor Emma visited. I wondered if Scott felt inferior to David. I thought that might be why he was avoiding coming home. But David scoffed at my thoughts.
"Mom doesn't understand Scott. He wouldn't avoid coming home for such a reason."
That's true. Scott and David always got along well. I was troubled, pondering what was keeping Scott away from home. Then one day, Nancy and Emma suddenly came to visit. Nancy was still beautiful, but her makeup seemed heavier than usual. Influenced by her mother, Emma, only 11, was wearing makeup too. Before I could say anything, Emma stretched out her hand. "Grandma, give me $100 as an allowance." The first thing my granddaughter did was to demand $100 from me. Did she mistake her grandma for an ATM? As I stood there, stunned, Nancy didn't even bother to reprimand Emma. "Violet, Scott's salary isn't enough for Emma to buy the clothes she likes." Both Nancy and Emma were dressed in flashy brand name clothes. Were they squandering Scott's salary on such extravagance? Nancy and Emma, demanding money, looked foolish and frivolous. Angry, I rejected Nancy and Emma's request. "I don't appreciate being asked for money out of the blue." When I firmly refused, Nancy glared at me with eyes narrowed in anger. "Who do you think married your dull son?" I realized this was Nancy's true nature. Emma, mimicking her mom, laughed and called me "old woman." While we were glaring at each other, David came home. Upon seeing Nancy and Emma, he immediately said,
A foolish daughter-in-law and niece are no family of mine. Get out!
Undeterred, Emma shamelessly asked David for money. "David, if you're making big bucks at your corporation job, give me an allowance."
Emma, come back when you have raised your IQ.
As David glared sharply, Nancy and Emma left, clicking their tongues. After kicking them out, David sighed and murmured,
It's clear now how Scott is being treated.
A few days after David kicked out Nancy and Emma, on a weekend he and I were relaxing at home. I was worried about Scott, but I had another concern. David had the financial means to live independently, but was still staying at home. Actually, David had a girlfriend at the large corporation where they both started together. They had been dating since they joined, and I wondered if they were thinking of marriage. While drinking tea, I asked David, "David, are you staying at home because you're worried about Mom and Scott?" I sighed, and David responded with a wry smile.
I'm thinking of marrying my girlfriend, but she's busy with work too.
They were both considering marriage, but their busy lives kept them from becoming a couple. I wasn't sure if that was the truth or if David was just being considerate of me. Despite his sharp tongue, David is kind to those he cares about. As I pondered this, the doorbell rang. David checked who it was, and I saw him gasp. Without hesitation, he ran to the door. I followed and found Scott, weakened and collapsed at the door. To my shock, Scott weakly pleaded,
Mom, please let me stay for just one day.
Scott, emaciated and pale, was clearly suffering from malnutrition. As David carried Scott, he asked me,
Let Scott rest. Mom, call the nearby hospital. He probably needs an IV.
I nodded at David's instructions and called our familiar hospital. The doctor who came for a house visit said that Scott was weak from overwork and malnutrition. We were told that it could have been life-threatening if he was found any later, which sent chills down my spine. Even after the IV treatment, Scott remained motionless, asleep. I wondered why Scott had come to us in such a state. As I pondered, I heard Scott crying. Entering the room, I saw David soothing Scott, who was in tears. In a gentle voice, I asked Scott, "Scott, can you tell me what happened?" Scott just kept crying and didn't respond. David quietly explained instead.
Scott was being treated like a slave by Nancy and Emma. They forced him into doing side jobs and he was exhausted.
Nancy and Emma had been exploiting Scott, making him work hard to earn money. Scott had to come to me for help, completely worn out. I couldn't help but shout, "Why didn't you come to Mom before it got this bad?" Scott kept crying, even as I lamented. David sighed and admonished me gently.
Mom, Scott is tired. Don't raise your voice.
Nodding at David's words, I stroked Scott's head and said, "Let's live together here." At my proposal, Scott raised his tearful face and asked, "Really?" I smiled at the weakened Scott. Of course. Now, rest easy. Scott finally seemed reassured and fell asleep. David looked at me and muttered,
I doubt that foolish Nancy will stay quiet.
His words proved accurate. The next day, Nancy and Emma stormed in, but I had made up my mind. Nancy, I will never forgive you. Nancy was screaming outside our house like a mad woman. Give me back my wallet now! Even though Scott was weak, she intended to exploit him further. Despite telling Scott to hide in his room, he came out, frightened by Nancy's voice. Even after being mistreated and exhausted, he still obeyed Nancy. David said it was a complete dependency. Despite the abuse, Scott didn't want to be hated and depended on her. He had been in this dreadful relationship for too long. Why Scott depended on such a terrifying woman was beyond me, but it was clear that Nancy and Scott shouldn't continue their marriage. Before Nancy arrived, Scott had a long talk with David. It became clear that Scott wanted a divorce. He had thought about it many times, but Nancy's threats made him give up. I confronted Nancy directly. Nancy, unfortunately, Scott wants a divorce. Will you just leave after the divorce? Provoked, Nancy distorted her face with anger and yelled at Scott. Scott, you're abandoning me and Emma? You know what will happen. How dare you? To Nancy's threats, I smiled mischievously. Things won't end well. Nancy, the one in trouble isn't us, it's you. We consulted a lawyer to sue Nancy for harming Scott physically and mentally. The lawyer wouldn't stay silent once he examined Scott's weakened condition. When I mentioned this, Nancy laughed loudly. Don't be ridiculous. This is a marital issue. A husband being oppressed by his wife is just embarrassing. Nancy unwittingly confessed, unaware that David was recording everything on a voice recorder. Was she too careless out of fear? Scott also had a responsibility for not seeking a divorce sooner and becoming dependent. If Scott had stood firm, Emma wouldn't have followed Nancy's example. I reflected on my part in indulging Scott's innocence. David, expressionless, asked a trembling Scott,
Scott, tell us in your own words. What do you want? Do you want a divorce?
Looking at David, Scott, lips quivering, finally said, I want a divorce. I can't take being exploited by Nancy anymore. At Scott's words, David nodded and smiled slightly.
Understood. Mom, we can really bring Nancy down.
David seemed almost excited as he said this, and Nancy started to look a bit intimidated. Unlike the kind and naive Scott, David was not someone who could be easily subdued. David, quick to act while Scott was bedridden, set in motion a plan to bring Nancy down. He contacted his girlfriend, whom he was dating. David graduated with a degree in economics, but his girlfriend was a law graduate. Although she worked in a regular company, she had connections with excellent lawyers. David used his connections as a means to save Scott. Upon learning the situation, David's girlfriend, who was a senior in the same law school and specialized in family and domestic issues, referred us to a strong attorney. The lawyer, after confirming my and David's testimonies and examining Scott's condition, declared confidently, the likelihood of domestic violence is strong. He asserted that if we filed a lawsuit, we would likely win. This meant Scott could not only file for divorce, but also demand compensation from Nancy in the divorce proceedings, and even pursue criminal charges. As I explained this calmly, Nancy's face gradually turned pale. That's exaggerated. Scott is the incompetent one. Despite Nancy's dismissive response, I calmly said, a wife forcing her husband to work unreasonably and verbally abusing him is a valid reason for divorce, and we can sue you to the point of no return. I persuaded her that if she quietly agreed to the divorce, we wouldn't sue. But Nancy snapped, Scott is my wallet, and lunged at me. I had been waiting for this moment. I purposely fell and yelled loudly, Someone help! My daughter-in-law is trying to strangle me! Neighbors rushed out of their houses at my scream. David quietly grabbed his phone.
Hello? My mom is being attacked by her daughter-in-law."
The police arrived quickly after David's call. They listened to the story, looking incredulously at Nancy. Nancy insisted, "I'm innocent. My mother-in-law fell on her own." However, Emma contradicted her. "Mom attacked Grandma. That's why Grandma fell." Betrayed by Emma, Nancy is furious. In her anger, Nancy struck Emma's cheek. The police, witnessing this, took Nancy away unconditionally. Due to insufficient evidence in the domestic dispute, Nancy was released. But I relentlessly sued her. Nancy didn't work herself. She used Scott's salary for leisure with Emma. Eventually running out of money, she threatened Scott and made him work incessantly without rest. Scott is now pressing for a divorce, citing Nancy's domestic violence. Thanks to a competent lawyer, the divorce between Scott and Nancy was smoothly finalized. It was deemed impossible for Nancy to have custody, so Scott got Emma's custody. Nancy was sued for compensation by Scott, which she initially refused, despite being warned by the lawyer about the consequences of not paying. Scott, exhausted from overwork, hasn't been in good health. David and I have been taking turns nursing him. Emma seems uncomfortable, possibly realizing her mistake. Neither David nor I have completely forgiven her. We fear she might turn out like Nancy. Life was peaceful for a while, but then an incident occurred. Nancy, in a fit of revenge, caused a scene at the lawyer's office, a hopeless person never learning her lesson. However, Nancy was reported by the staff at the lawyer's office. She was arrested by the police for damaging the office's equipment and faced demands for compensation. According to David, this was an expected outcome at the lawyer's office. Nancy is struggling with the compensation to Scott and the damages to the lawyer's office. Furthermore, she's legally prohibited from approaching Scott. No longer a daughter-in-law, Nancy was disowned by her family. Nancy, struggling to pay a large sum of money borrowed from dangerous financial institutions. It was clear that the growing interest would make repayment difficult. But that's fine. She should suffer for exploiting Scott for her own greed. I thanked David's girlfriend, who had been consulting with David for quite a while. David had realized that Scott was avoiding home due to being threatened by Nancy. He had confided in his girlfriend, asking for her support in case of an emergency. I took a leave of absence to nurse the bedridden Scott. Ultimately, without David's initiative, we couldn't have saved Scott. "Mothers can be so powerless," I muttered. As I said this, Scott, who had been sleeping, woke up. His complexion seemed better, perhaps due to his recovery. While drinking lukewarm water, Scott said to me, "If only I had been more resolute, strong and smart like David." Scott was remorseful, blaming himself for his weakness. I told Scott, who was tearfully regretting firmly, though it might seem harsh, "If you feel ashamed, then be resolute from now on." Scott, looking down, finally lifted his head and nodded firmly. Since Scott regained his strength, he returned to his job from which he had been on leave. Though his side jobs were discovered at work, his boss, understanding Scott's circumstances, decided not to pursue the matter. Currently, Scott is living with David and me at home. Emma was sternly told by David, her uncle, "Emma, you'll be enrolled in a very strict boarding school to straighten out your character." David decided to send Emma to a strict boarding school, judging it difficult for Scott to correct her behavior. Honestly, I couldn't unconditionally love Emma, who had sided with Nancy at this stage. A disciplined school with communal living was better for Emma's future. Scott was worried about Emma, but David quietly told him, "I told Emma to write a letter when she reflects on her actions." So, Emma is receiving strict education at the boarding school. I retired from the accounting firm and am living freely. Scott moved, settling near our home. He received several letters from Emma saying, "Dad, I'm sorry." But Emma seems to have adapted to the boarding school and is studying energetically. She calls David for help with difficult study questions. David seems happy to see Emma changing for the better.
Next vacation when Emma returns, I have something to report.
David said. Scott and I were curious. Then, during the school break, Emma came home. The Emma we met after a long time was much more polite. Dad, Grandma, David, I'm back home. Welcome back, Emma. Grandma has prepared a feast for you. Finally, I could let go of the past and embrace Emma as my granddaughter. Just as we were about to enjoy dinner, David made his announcement.
I'm getting married. My fiancé will come to greet you soon.
David decided to marry after Scott and Emma settled down. Scott congratulated him with a smile.
David, congratulations!
Emma also smiled happily. David, congratulations! Tears welled up in my eyes as I watched this scene. Congratulations, David. Be happy. David nodded happily at my words.
Sorry, but my girlfriend, 20 years younger, is pregnant. I prefer younger women, so let's get a divorce. That's fine, right? Divorcing is fine, but please take care of our son. What? Take the son too. Weren't you so fond of him? No way, because that child is... I stopped speaking there. If it's just a conversation between us, there's no problem. But this conversation must also be heard by Abel, who is in the room. What would he think if he heard this? That's my only worry. However, if I don't speak up now, this man won't understand the gravity of the situation. It's too convenient for him to destroy our happiness and then find happiness himself. I won't allow it. Just like our happiness was taken away, I want to take away this man's happiness. Driven by these thoughts, I decided to confront Morgan with a shocking truth. My name is Camelia Whistler, 41 years old. I live with my husband, Morgan, and our 12-year-old son, Abel. I married Morgan 13 years ago when I was 28. Back then, I worked as an insurance agent. I visited various companies to sell insurance. During this time, I met Morgan. Morgan worked at a local import company and had just divorced his wife. She cheated on me and left me. Now it's just my 5-year-old son and me, living a lonely life. Morgan said this, looking down sadly. Whenever I visited Morgan's company for work, I made a point to talk to him. Eventually, Morgan asked me out. However, we never went out alone. Morgan always brought his son Abel. He can't be left alone, right? I wish you could be his new mother, but you probably don't want to marry a man with a child, right? Seeing him like this made me think. He truly cares about his child. Someone who cares for their child like this will surely care for their family. So I decided to marry Morgan. But it was all an act to marry me. In fact, as soon as we married, everything changed. I quit my job to focus on housework. All the housework and childcare became my responsibility. That wasn't the problem, but Morgan started neglecting Abel. Before marriage, he brought Abel on our dates, but after marriage, he neglected him. Morgan never spoke to Abel on weekends or weekdays. He stopped doing things like taking him out or playing with him. Even when Abel started elementary school, Morgan's attitude didn't change. I attended the entrance ceremony alone, and he ignored school events. I wish you'd participate in Abel's school events. When I said this, Morgan frowned. Then, sighing in annoyance, I'm tired from work. But, you're annoying. Taking care of the son is the mother's job. Do it properly. He would end the conversation like this, yelling. Where did the man I married go? I regretted it a little. Then, one day, Abel, who had come back from elementary school, was helping me prepare dinner. I received an email from Morgan. What? You're bringing your subordinates home? It looks like he's going to bring some of his subordinates home. Morgan had just been promoted to section chief. He probably wanted to build relationships with his new subordinates. What should I do? I don't have enough ingredients. They'll probably drink at home, so I needed to prepare food. It's only an hour's drive from the company to home. I decided to go to the nearby supermarket to buy ingredients. When I got home, I started cooking in a hurry. I'll help you. Oh, thank you. Then please prepare the plates. We prepared diligently, but there were limits. Morgan returned home when about half the preparation was done. I'm home. Hey, I brought my colleagues. Morgan shouted from the entrance. I greeted them briefly and guided them to the living room. Then I served the drinks and appetizers. While thinking about the next dish, Morgan came into the kitchen and asked me, Hey, how's the food coming? It's in progress. There are appetizers, so it should be fine. What were you doing? I gave you a heads up. If you had told me earlier... Shut up! You should be able to do this. I'll be embarrassed. I was yelled at and left speechless. Of course, I have many things I want to argue about, but the voice in the kitchen can be heard in the living room. The guests must be feeling uncomfortable. Thinking this, I couldn't talk back. In the end, I silently dealt with the guests. After the guests left, I had a huge fight with Morgan. I was furious with Morgan for yelling at me just for his convenience. Then Morgan said resentfully, like a child, Fine, from now on, I'll drink at the bar. Happy now? After that, Morgan started going out frequently. He began spending money recklessly and leaving the house quickly on weekends. By that time, Abel had become a middle school student, and expenses like school fees started to increase. So I discussed with Morgan about starting a part-time job. Part-time? What, you want money to play around? No, it's for things like Abel's school fees. Oh, is that so? Do whatever you want. Morgan seemed drunk and responded carelessly, but at least I got his consent. So I started working part-time, as an insurance agent. I asked my former boss to hire me as a part-time employee. This will make things a bit easier. Still, Morgan complained, so I couldn't neglect housework. I had limited working hours and had to prepare dinner before Morgan returned. I managed my time well and continued working. Then one day, I got delayed at work. I rushed home, but Morgan had already returned. As soon as he saw me, Morgan asked angrily, Where have you been? Working, of course. Working? Were you cheating on me? Morgan looked at me suspiciously. That's ridiculous. I denied it, but Morgan still looked at me doubtfully. What should I do? When suddenly, Morgan reached for my mobile phone. Let me see. I'll check for any men's names. Stop it. Shut up! Morgan forcefully took my mobile phone and started checking the contacts. He quickly found my boss's name. Hey, who's this? A man's name, right? That's my boss. He's your lover, I see. Morgan immediately called my boss. Stop it! Be quiet! Eventually, the misunderstanding was cleared up. Of course, I apologized to my boss many times. I told Morgan to apologize too, but he just looked away. It's your fault for causing such a misunderstanding. He kept repeating that. Since then, our relationship has only become more strained. It didn't change even when Abel became a high school student. Is this really okay? I thought so, but I couldn't find a way to improve our relationship. While I was worried, Abel became a senior in high school. Lately, Morgan and I have completely fallen out. We don't even argue at home anymore. So it doesn't interfere with Abel's study for exams. It's okay to stay like this until Abel's exams are over. I thought so. Then, one day, I had to go near Morgan's company for work. If we were on good terms, I would have invited him for a meal. As I muttered this, I saw Morgan's car stopped at an intersection. Morgan? And who? I squinted and saw two people talking happily. At that moment, The word affair crossed my mind. He suspects me of cheating and then cheats himself? What is this? I was so dismayed I couldn't say anything. I secretly took a photo of the two and brought it to a detective agency for an investigation into Morgan's conduct. I don't need to see the results to know. That thought crossed my mind. Of course, I decided to divorce, but evidence is important for any action. So, I waited for the results of the investigation. About a month later, the investigation results came, and the affair was confirmed. Really, what a joke. I'm not satisfied with just divorcing. How should I get back at him? I thought about this on a certain day off. Morgan, who was supposed to be out, returned home early. He came straight to me. Sorry, but my girlfriend 20 years younger is pregnant. Huh? I doubted my ears, but Morgan, with a faint smile, said, So my girlfriend, 20 years younger, is pregnant. I prefer younger women, so let's get a divorce. That's fine, right? To confess to cheating so blatantly is astonishing, but this is an opportunity. Thinking this, I decided to make the most of this chance. Divorcing is fine, but please take care of our son. I said this with a smile, and Morgan was shocked. What? Take the son too. Weren't you so fond of him? No way. Because that child is... I chose my words carefully. This conversation must be heard by Abel, who was studying for exams. What would he think if he heard this? That's my only worry. However, if I don't speak up now, this man won't understand the gravity of the situation. He's destroyed our happiness and now wants to be happy himself. I won't allow it. Just like our happiness was taken away, I want to take away this man's happiness. Driven by these thoughts, I decided to confront Morgan with a shocking truth. Sorry, but Abel is your son, not mine. What are you talking about? We're a married couple. Our child is both of ours. Morgan said this with a smug look. At that moment, I was dumbfounded. Is this man stupid? He's lived 4 years longer than me and still knows nothing. I was too astounded to speak. Surprised by his ignorance, I sighed and told Morgan the truth. Abel is the child of you and your ex-wife, right? So what? That means Abel is a stepchild to me. To make a stepchild my own, adoption is necessary. Adoption? Morgan frowned. Legally, a stepchild remains a stepchild. To become a true parent, you have to adopt the child. Otherwise, you can't have parental rights or legally recognize them as your child. Of course, in society, they may be seen as parent and child, but there's no legal binding. Parents have no obligation to provide support, and children have no right to inherit. I didn't adopt Abel when I married you, so I can't take him with me. Wait a minute. So I have to take care of Abel? That's how it is. You can't be charged with child abandonment just because you neglected him. Abel is still in high school. His parents have an obligation to raise him, meaning Morgan can't just abandon him. Morgan, stunned, pleaded with me. Please, that won't work. What won't? I have a child coming. I'm divorcing you to live with the newborn and my girlfriend, Dina. That's my condition for marrying her. So, the other woman's name is Dina. So, that's not my concern. It is! Just say you'll take Abel and it's settled. I already said it's impossible. Please, don't ruin my happiness. Morgan begged. Don't ruin his happiness? What a joke. He destroyed our happiness and now wants his own. I clenched my lips and told Morgan, No matter what you say, it's impossible. Ask your girlfriend Dina. You're really heartless. Fine, I'll make you regret this. Morgan slammed the table and stood up. Then he grabbed his mobile phone and left the room. I watched him go, and Morgan started making a call in the hallway. So, yes, that's right. Then I heard his voice. Eventually, Morgan returned and said to me, "Wait here. I'm bringing Dina." "What? You're bringing her here?" "Of course. You won't agree otherwise," Morgan yelled, seemingly unaware of his own fault. Since we have to discuss divorce compensation anyway, it might save time. With that thought, I quietly watched Morgan leave. About an hour after Morgan left, Morgan returned with a woman. When I glanced at the woman, she greeted me with a displeased face. "Hello, nice to meet you." She wouldn't meet my eyes. I can understand her feelings. Meeting the wife of her lover's affair is never pleasant. Putting that aside, Dina was the woman in Morgan's car that day. I can't help thinking it's because of this woman. But thanks to her, I can bring Morgan down. As I thought this, a smile naturally spread across my face. How should I start the conversation? While pondering this, Dina spoke first. You're Camellia, right? Don't you love your child? You've been living together for 13 years. Are you talking about Abel? Of course I love him. I think of him as my own child. Then why are you abandoning him? You should take him with you. I looked at Dina for a moment. Sweat was beading on her forehead, as I thought. She seems to be accusing me, but that's not really the case. I remember the results of Morgan's conduct investigation. If what's written about Dina's situation is true, her insistence makes sense. So I decided to shake things up a bit. I would like to take him with me, but no matter how much I love him, legally, only Morgan is Abel's parent. I can't be Abel's parent. But, yes, so another option is not getting divorced, though I would claim compensation from Dina. As I smiled, Dina was shocked. Then she looked at Morgan. Morgan, I can't pay compensation. Don't worry, I'll cover it, and I will definitely divorce and be with you. As Morgan said this, I interrupted. What are you talking about? We haven't decided to divorce yet. Shut up! I'm definitely divorcing. Then you're taking Abel with you? That's what we need to discuss now. The conversation isn't progressing. Dina, what do you think? I turned the conversation to Dina. Then Dina, looking displeased. I absolutely can't raise someone else's child. It's disgusting. Even if it's the child of the person you love? Of course, I love Morgan, not some unknown woman's child. Oh, really? But isn't that a strange argument? Why? You don't want to raise someone else's child, that's fine. But you're okay with Morgan raising another man's child? As I said this, Dina's face suddenly turned pale. Morgan tilted his head in confusion. What are you talking about? About the child? Dina's unborn child. This child is mine. I already said so. Sure, you said that. But it's weird. According to my investigation, the father of Dina's child is another man. As I said this, Morgan turned to Dina. Dina looked down, pale-faced, and Morgan stared at her. I almost burst into laughter at the scene. Then Morgan confronted Dina. Is that true? What do you mean? About the father of the child. Don't be silly. The father of this child is Morgan. Dina banged on the table in protest. But I calmly countered, That's not true. Here's the proof. I placed a photo on the table. It was a photo from the conduct investigation. The photo showed Dina talking with an unknown man in front of a gynecologist's office. According to the investigation, you have a boyfriend. That child in your belly is his, right? That... Dina stammered and became speechless. Seeing this, Morgan realized everything and lost his composure. So, divorce me and raise the child together. But Morgan, you'll be raising another man's child. Dina, you're okay with that, right? Oh, that's it. Don't forget about Abel. Wait! Let's start over. If I break up with this woman, we don't have to divorce, right? What? How convenient for you. I was planning to divorce anyway. This is lucky. Plus, since you admitted to cheating, I'll demand a lot of compensation from both of you. As I said this, I slammed the evidence of their affair on the table. Photos of their affair spread across the table. Of course, there were also photos of Dina with the unknown man. Morgan grabbed one of the photos and yelled at Dina, "You lying woman! You ruined everything!" That's my line. If you think about it, it's obvious. I prefer younger men. I thought I could just take the money and leave if I had to take the child. Morgan and Dina suddenly started arguing with each other. Astonished, I told Morgan and his group, "Fight amongst yourselves!" and kicked them out of the house. After that, I headed to Abel's room. I knocked on the door and Abel came out. "Sorry, you heard the conversation, didn't you?" "Well, yeah, but it's Dad's fault, not yours, Mom." "But still..." "Really, I'm fine. I'll be a college student next year. I'll make Dad pay for the moving expenses, and then I'll handle the rest." Abel smiled. It seemed he was more mature than I thought. I was relieved to see my son's growth. However, his father, Morgan, had not grown at all. He wouldn't answer my calls no matter how much I tried to contact him. Even after several days, the situation didn't change. We couldn't proceed with the divorce discussions. With no sign of him returning home, I decided to go to Morgan's company. I didn't want to barge in unannounced and cause trouble. So I contacted Thompson, Morgan's superior, before heading there. Upon arriving at the company, Mr. Thompson, the executive, promptly attended to me and called Morgan to his office. Dina was also summoned. I spoke to Morgan. "You know why I'm here, don't you?" "What now?" "You're not responding to the divorce discussions. How long do you plan to ignore this?" I said firmly, and Morgan shrugged his shoulders. Then, looking at Dina, "I have something to say to you, too. Since you've been ignoring me, I've decided on the compensation amount myself. The compensation for the affair is $20,000. Please take care of it." $20,000? Impossible! I can't pay that. Impossible? But you have to. If you refuse, it'll just go to court. Court? If it goes to court, your boyfriend will find out about the affair, though I suppose he already knows by now. I smiled and Dina looked downcast. Apparently, Dina's real boyfriend also worked at this company, so it was only a matter of time before her affair was discovered. Eventually, Dina accepted my demand. Morgan resisted until the end, but after being persuaded by the executive, he agreed to pay the compensation. "Well, I'll be leaving then." As I got up to leave, Morgan complained to me. "Coming to my company like this? Are you kidding me? What if this ruins my reputation?" "It's your fault, not mine. Besides, an affair won't get you fired." In fact, an affair is not a reason for dismissal. However, how it would affect him at work, and how comfortable he would feel there, wasn't certain. But that's not my concern. I came to get him to agree to the divorce discussions. If Morgan ended up leaving the company because of this, that's not my problem. The same went for Dina. "Good luck then," I said to Morgan and Dina and left the company. Afterward, through my lawyer, I was able to receive compensation from both of them. But according to Mr. Thompson, there were problems. After I left his office, the story of their affair quickly spread throughout the company. Naturally, Dina's boyfriend heard about it. They argued, and he broke up with her on the spot. Enraged at being dumped, Dina demanded compensation from Morgan. Of course, Morgan refused. It eventually led to a court case. Furthermore, due to the affair becoming public and the lawsuit, both ended up leaving the company. Morgan struggled to find another job due to his age. Now he seems to be working at a convenience store. Dina, being pregnant, apparently retreated to her parents' home. Until the court case is settled, I expect their lives to be uncomfortable. As for me, everything's going smoothly. I was even offered a full-time position by my boss. Thanks to that, I'm now working full-time again. My relationship with Abel, who is working hard on his exams, is also good. He even said, "I've got a girlfriend, I want you to meet her. Even though I'm not your mother anymore?" When I asked this, Abel said, "Legally, Dad might be the parent, but I respect you more as a parent, Mom. Now I'm just waiting for my son's successful exam results.
Hey sis, it's your birthday today, right? Happy birthday. How does it feel to be 30 and still not have a boyfriend? Well, I don't have a boyfriend, but if it were me, I'd be so pessimistic about the future that I jump into a river. If I got pessimistic about everything, I wouldn't have enough lives. Exactly. Growing up ugly since you were born made you strong. My younger sister Louise has always looked down on me and made fun of me since we were kids. And our parents always turned a blind eye to it. I'm Lucia, 30 years old. Louise, my 5-year-old sister, has had white skin, clear facial features, and looked like a cute doll since she was born. She has always been praised whenever she went. In contrast, I have no ordinary face, so my parents always dressed Louise up and favored her. That's why I worked hard in school, to be praised by my parents. Mom, I got a perfect score. Oh, really? That's great. By the way, Louise has a recital at her preschool. I bought this dress for her. Isn't it beautiful? I think it suits Louise well. Did you buy it again? You just bought new clothes the other day. Well, it's a recital, and she looks good in anything she wears. Unlike you, she's worth buying for. You understand, right? Yeah, I guess. Louise went to a famous girls' school, but I went to the nearest school from our house. I worked hard and was always at the top of my class. But my parents never praised me. Louise never studied, but my parents were always happy because she would be beautiful in the future. It's okay. Louise doesn't have to study. She can be an actress or a model in the future. And she's so beautiful that she'll surely be able to marry a good man. Yeah, that's true. That's right. That's why you're studying so hard. Because you can't become an actress or a model since you're ugly. Louise, don't say that. It's mean to your sister. Well, but it's true. The family conversations were always centered around Louise. I always felt left out and isolated at home. Studying was the only way for me to prove my worth. But no matter how hard I tried, my parents never acknowledged me. I was out of their sight. During that time, I became interested in law. I was drawn to the words, "All people are equal under the law," which was in the Japanese language I was studying. Even if Louise and I were not treated equally, maybe we were equal under the law, I thought. After graduating high school, I wanted to major in law at university and dreamed of becoming a prosecutor or a lawyer. But as senior year approached and it was time for career counseling, my mom said I didn't have to go to university. What? Louis' school is expensive. She's still in the middle school, and there will be high school and university expenses in the future. We can't afford your university fees. But I want to go to university and study. You're the older sister. You should be patient for your sister's sake. If possible, I want you to use the money you earn from working for Louise. Dad agrees too. What? When Mom said that like it was the most natural thing in the world, I felt devastated. It was yet another harsh reminder that no matter how hard I try, my parents will never acknowledge me. After graduating high school, I got a job at a small printing company and moved out of the house, thinking that if I stayed, my salary would just be exploited for my sister's benefit. When I said I was moving out, my parents tried their hardest to make me stay, saying it would be inconvenient for them if I left. Was there a hint of sadness in their voices? I hoped that I'd feel missed. That sweet expectation was quickly crushed. They were only worried that the money I gave them would lessen if I left. If they had said they were worried or wanted to live with me, I might have reconsidered. But such words never left their lips. So my feelings remained unchanged. I realized even more that I had no place in this family.
You're moving out?
Yes, I am.
Yay! Now I got your room, sister. I have so many clothes that Dad and Mom bought for me, and they won't all fit in my room.
Suit yourself. And with that, I began my life living alone. I didn't feel lonely at all. In fact, living without my parents or sister telling me what to do felt incredibly liberating. I never went back home after I left. And while my parents never asked me to visit or show my face, my sister occasionally reached out. When she entered college and when she got a job at a big corporation after graduation, she made sure to show off each time.
I got a job at a big company, like you. I actually went to college.
Good for you.
You've got a boyfriend yet? Oh, wait. Of course not. Who would date someone who couldn't even get into college? Who's ugly and works at a failing printing company? I never had trouble with men.
Right.
We haven't seen each other in so long. Have you gotten uglier? Send me a picture so I can laugh.
No way.
Jeez, you're no fun. You're such a drag, sister.
What's fun about my sister contacting me just to belittle me and laugh? I don't need to pick up the phone. But what if it's something important, like news about our parents? Even though I consider my parents practically non-existent, if they were ill, there's no way my sister would care for them. That thought always makes me answer the call. Parents are parents, no matter what. At least that's what I thought at the time. Look, if it's just to talk about boring stuff, don't bother contacting me. Just let me know if something happens to Dad or Mom. I told my sister that countless times. So maybe it's unnecessary worry. But whenever she contacts me, I can't help but think something might have happened.
Are you saying that if something happens, you're just going to come for the inheritance?
What are you talking about?
Sister, you're awful. You just want Dad and Mom to go to heaven quickly, don't you?
Stop saying that.
I'm going to tell Dad and Mom that you said you wish my sister would die.
Louise! I wonder how she can say such nerve-wracking things all the time. Maybe it's because she looked down on me since we were little, and that's become a habit for her. She enjoys putting me down, and that's what makes her happy. I try not to react and not to let it bother me, but it still hurts. I can't help but feel sad because of the difference between my sister, who has always been forgiven for everything she says, and me, who has never been acknowledged no matter what I do. But after she got a job, we lost contact for a while. Maybe she's grown up a bit now that she's a company employee. So when she contacted me for the first time in 2 years on my 30th birthday and said,
Happy birthday.
But then she said,
How does it feel to be 30 and not have a boyfriend?
And my happiness disappeared. I was even sadder because I had expected something else. If that's all you wanted, I'm hanging up.
I'm just trying to be nice by calling you on your birthday. But actually, I have something important to tell you. I'm getting married.
Oh, really? Congratulations.
Are you jealous? The guy is a graduate of a state university and works for a big company. And his family is rich.
That's great.
You could never land a guy like him. You've never even had a boyfriend, have you? Do you want me to give you some of the guys I've dumped?
I sighed, realizing she was just showing off. And I realized once again that our parents don't even talk about me. That's fine.
Look at you acting all strong. I'll call you again later. Oh, by the way, how much are you going to give me for a wedding gift? It better not be a cheap amount.
She said what she wanted to say and hung up. She hasn't changed at all. I had given up on expecting anything from my family long ago. I hadn't been in touch with my parents for a while, but 2 years ago I tried to let them know how I was doing. But both Dad and Mom showed no interest in me at all. If you're going to send me money, that's fine. But if not, I don't want you to contact me. I don't have time to deal with you, Mom told me. I didn't want to rely on them at all. But after hearing those words, I felt like I made a mistake by contacting them. I'm sure our parents are happy about my sister's wedding, and once she gets married, we will become even more distant. But that's fine with me. 2 months later, my sister contacted me to tell me that the wedding date had been set.
The venue is a famous wedding hall that celebrities often use. A place you could never go.
Yeah?
And you know what? I've decided not to invite you to my wedding. I'll just take the wedding gift though.
What?
Are you shocked?
The first thought that came to my mind was whether she had ever intended to invite me in the first place. I never thought I would be invited, and I never even considered attending. That's why I was shocked when she told me I didn't need to be invited on purpose. I mean, I quickly realized she probably just wanted to see me get upset.
You know, he's a highly educated elite. If he knew about a family like yours, it would be embarrassing. He said his friends are all well educated and rich. You wouldn't want to be the odd one out, would you?
I get it. I won't go.
If it bothers you, why don't you find someone as good as him? But I guess it's too much for someone like you, huh? Want me to at least show you his face?
I'm good.
Don't be so jealous. He's incredibly handsome. Someone you'd never get a chance to meet.
With that, she sent me a photo of her fiancé without even being asked. I wasn't particularly interested, but I took a look anyway. However, the moment I saw him, I thought, wait a minute. I felt like I'd seen that face before.
See? We'd be the perfect couple, right?
Hold on, is this guy...
What? You want to nitpick?
Not that, but where did you meet him? Someone from Louis's company?
Nope, at a party. It was exclusively for wealthy, well-educated men. Finding a life partner is different from just dating, you know. Gotta be picky.
I've never been to such marriage-minded parties. When I inquired more, attendees apparently had to show ID and men had to provide proof of income. I asked for his name. It wasn't someone I thought I knew. Perhaps I was mistaken. I felt it might be intrusive to push further, but I was really curious. When I asked if she had met his parents, she said no.
They live in another country. They're coming here a week before the wedding. That's when I'll meet them. Oh, maybe I can invite you for that. Not the wedding, but you'd want to see his face, right?
Meeting the parents? Sure, I can go.
So you want to see him after all? I'll allow it, just once. But don't drool, okay?
It wasn't like I was eager to meet him, but I had a reason to. I didn't tell her because I wasn't certain yet. I might not be believed, and she'd just accuse me of being bitter. However, on the day of our meeting at the restaurant, I noticed both my parents and sister seem uneasy outside. Seeing them, I felt my concerns might be correct. What's wrong? What happened?
She hasn't shown up yet, and the restaurant said they didn't have our reservation.
Did you contact him?
I called many times, but he kept saying the number isn't in use. It was fine just yesterday.
Hey, you didn't give him any money, right?
Why?
You did?
I gave him $50,000 for the wedding.
$50,000?
He said he couldn't access his funds for work right now, but he promised to pay back with interest after the wedding.
Louise, you have been had...
Huh?
I had just received a consultation from a woman who had met a man at a party, lent him a significant amount of money, and recently started to worry that she may have been deceived. The photo of the man she had shown me was identical to a photo my sister had sent me of a man she knew. The stories I had heard from the woman and my sister were eerily similar. They met at a party aimed at finding marriage partners. Their parents lived in another country and so on. The woman had gotten suspicious and contacted the company where the man worked, but was unable to reach him as he was supposedly out on business. However, she felt relieved to find out that he was indeed employed at the company. But as soon as she brought up the money she had lent him, all communication ceased. She tried calling the company, but he was always out. So she decided to visit the office in person, only to be told by the man himself that he didn't know her. Feeling desperate, she came to me for advice.
What do you mean, had?
It means she was deceived.
What the hell are you talking about? Just because you're jealous of me, don't make up ridiculous stories.
Then why can't you get in touch with him?
But how would you know anything about that, sis?
I just had a consultation with a woman who may have been deceived by a man who looks exactly like your boyfriend. She wanted to know what she would do and if she would get her money back.
Consultation? What consultation? Why would she consult you? You're useless.
Well, that's because I'm a lawyer.
Huh?
My sister and parents were all shocked by my words. After graduating from high school, I got a job at a printing company and studied for the bar exam on my own while working. I spent 5 hours studying every night after work and the entire day on weekends. Even so, it took me 5 years just to get to the point where I could take the preliminary bar exam. But all my hard work paid off when I passed the preliminary exam at the age of 23, and then passed the bar exam the following year on my first try. I went on to complete my legal training and got a job at a small law firm at the age of 26.
Don't lie. There's no way. Who didn't even go to college could become a lawyer?
I worked really hard. I didn't want to give up on my dream just because I couldn't go to college. Well, thanks to you. I had a determination to face any challenge. That's probably why I was able to do it.
You're lying. Dad and Mom didn't say anything about that, did they?
I didn't tell them. I was going to tell them when I got married. I did contact them about it.
Married? Sis, are you married?
I guess you didn't know that either. I thought you might not know because of the weird things you were saying about my boyfriend.
You're lying. You said you didn't have a boyfriend.
Well, that's because I have a husband. 2 years ago, when I told my parents that I was getting married to someone who had no family, like parents or relatives, and we wouldn't have a wedding, my mom said,
"Figures you'd only be able to marry someone like that?"
They never asked about my partner's profession or even what kind of person they were. Even though I had contacted them for the first time in nearly 10 years, they didn't ask how I was or if I had been well. There wasn't even a simple congratulations. All they said was only to rely on them. Their cautious tone, as if I was about to ask for money, deeply disappointed me. So I didn't tell them I had become a lawyer. I couldn't imagine parents who wouldn't even celebrate their child's marriage being happy about them becoming a lawyer. It became clear to me that my parents were not at all interested in me. In fact, they seemed to prefer to not be involved with me at all. For them, having my younger sister was enough.
You're seriously a lawyer?
Yes, I'm working at my husband's firm now.
So your husband's a lawyer too?
Yes. I then shared with my sister what I recently discovered about this man. He wasn't employed at the company the client mentioned. There was someone with the same name, but it was a completely different person. So this man was using someone else's identity. It was a clever deception. The person whose identity he was using was always out for business and hardly ever available, probably calculated on his part.
What does that mean?
I think he might be a professional marriage scam artist.
Marriage scam?
I thought I might met him here today, but it seems I'm too late.
What about the $50,000?
Both Dad and Mom were listening to my story, their faces turning pale. It seems they had provided the $50,000. I never thought they would give that kind of money. Considering it, my sister isn't the kind to have saved up that amount in the nearly 3 years since she started working. Given her impulsive nature, any salary she gets would be spent in no time. "Can you, as a lawyer, get the money back for us?" Mom said, as if it was obvious. But it's impossible to recover the money if we don't know where he is. My parents and sister pressured me to get the money back, but that's not my job. Plus, I had no intention of representing these people. Meeting them after nearly 12 years and all they cared about was the money. It made me feel like they were already strangers. "We're family, so it's natural to help, right?" "Were we family? I wasn't aware." "We need that money back. We spent so much on Louise over the years. We don't have extra. Louise said once she marries him, since he's wealthy, we could be comfortable. We even went into debt because of that." How could anyone say something so outrageous? As I listened in disbelief, Mom continued, seemingly seeking sympathy. "It seems my parents had been drowning in debt for a while. My sister had already quit her job, saying she couldn't return to work because it would be embarrassing to admit she'd been deceived. Desperate, they ranted about how I should cover their debts and help them out monthly, assuming as a lawyer I must be making good money. "We're even willing to live with you if you want." Something inside me snapped at that moment. I realized these people were no longer family to me. Engaging with them any further would just hurt. So I decided to protect myself and end the relationship. "I can help you. You should report this to the police or seek a lawyer." "You're abandoning your own parents?" "Did you ever consider me your daughter?" "I don't see you as my parents anymore." "Actually, I haven't for a long time. I have no intention of being involved with you." At that, Mom put on a show, crying about how I was their precious daughter and they valued me more than my sister. But it was too late. Hearing her words only made me feel colder inside. My sister frequently reached out, begging for money, but I ignored her. After some time, even Dad started calling, begging for help. Apparently, due to their debts, they sold the family home and now lived in a cramped apartment, enduring a tough life. To make matters worse, my sister wasn't working, just staying at home, eating junk food. Her skin looked awful. She'd gained weight, and she'd looked nothing like before. "She's not my daughter anymore. You're my only daughter." Fortunately, I had a separate mobile phone work. Moreover, they have shown no interest in me and do not even know where I live. So there is no way to contact him anymore. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders once I severed all ties. Later on, the conman who tricked them was arrested. He had several fake IDs suggesting he had many other crimes to answer for. I did my best to help the woman who came to me, hoping she'd recover some of her money. My husband and I will continue to work together, growing our law practice and living happily. If we ever have children, I want to shower them with all the love and care in the world.